Alright, hi world, hi YouTube. Welcome back to another Let's Play, and I'm jumping in, and I'm pretty excited because we're about to do Operation Barbarossa. Good old Operation Barbarossa. I'll tell you now, this operation is one of a kind, definitely, and it's an operation that to this very day I don't understand, which is kind of hard to say because you think that by year like 10, learning about this operation, that one would be familiar with this operation. But the truth is, it's like, no, this operation has a lot of moving parts. And calling it an operation is really I think it's disingenuous because it was more than just any operation. I would argue that it was a full out invasion. I mean, that's the only thing to call it, is an invasion. That's what it was. But it was, believe it or not, but most invasions actually have more than one operation. But in the eyes of the German High Command in the years 1940 and 1941, they really believed that they could knock out all of Russia with just one single operation. Nothing more was needed. It would have been the largest operation ever assembled, and therefore it would have been enough. And as we know in hindsight, the operation didn't really come to an end because the war would continue. The Soviets would launch their counteroffensives. We eventually found ourselves at Stalingrad a year later. The Germans were fighting at the doorstep of Leningrad for like 3 consecutive years. You had fighting near Moscow, fighting across cities and towns that we've never heard of, like Kursk, in which you had the largest tank battles in human history, some of the largest. And so it goes on and on and on, this large story of heavy urban fighting, heavy tank fighting, large fleets of aircraft, large assembly of armies encircling, battling out in harsh winter conditions. And so it's a very fascinating theater to explore because you actually have multiple things going on. And because it's such a large conflict, it really kind of has its own lore, if you want to call it that. It's lore, right? But this is not just lore, it's history, because you can actually read about actual events. And I do think that a lot of what's happening today is somehow a unfinished story in a real sense, or at least is painted that way, as an unfinished story of what was happening in World War II. And it wasn't just World War II. Once you take a deeper dive into like the politics of it all, you realize that it was much more than just about wars. What were these two nations? What did they stand for? What were the beliefs that they actually had? Neither one of them were the kind of the Western democracies that we know of today, that kind of like the status quo. They actually were the status quo back then as well, but you had these new players on the field that wanted to oppose geopolitically that, basically that sphere of power. And so we have the rise of Nazi Germany, we have the rise of communist Russia, and both took very big extremes for change. And essentially the Eastern Front is those two armies colliding with one another and fighting a war that the West has never seen and probably never will see because of how far-fetched the ideas were and how far they are willing to implement their ideas into the actual conflict. So as a war gamer, we don't really focus too much on it would be called, I guess, the history of war. We focus more on the military history. If there's any difference there, it's simply that the former will take you a deep dive into all facets of the war, not just from the perspective of the soldiers. It would be civilians fighting on the home front as well as the front. It would definitely take a deep dive into the Holocaust, which is really what makes World War II very unique. Although maybe not really. World War I had its fair share of events going on of the same degree, maybe not to the same scale, but to the same intensity, we'll say. And I digress. But military history, we focus more on the actual stats of the militaries. But I always find it important to mention this because there are some biases that have been carried over for the last few generations, few last century. The last thing we need is to add more biases to an already complicated historical event. And so this is why, I mean, you got to obviously check your sources. Definitely check your sources. But, this is an ongoing discussion. As some wise historians I've heard say, history lies in the debate. And so this is still very much a debate. And this is where like having information is relevant. So anyways, as a war gamer, we can just jump into the battles. And keep in mind that this is a game, so we're playing a simulation. If you want to call it that, it's a simulation. It's as close as it's going to get. And right now, we are literally moving blocks on a board. So that's just something that I think most of my audience is familiar with. But I also feel the need to remind my audience, like, let's just keep our eyes open as to what we're getting into, because I've spent enough years playing wargaming to know that you can find yourself playing countless hours, and unfortunately this is a historical game, or a semi-historical or ahistorical board game that has its greatest qualities immersed in realism. Very different than, say, playing Warhammer 40k, where you just know that the space orcs are just not really the same thing as historical events. So it allows you to kind of, I think, get away with more when you explore Warhammer, something more fictional. But I mean, it depends on how you go about it, but I like to stick to the realism as best I can. I think that's really where the deeper aspects of life can be further understood, frankly. So anyways, we're going to play as the Wehrmacht. We're playing as the Ostheer, the German Army of the East. Without further ado, let's just start the operation. I think, we've spent enough time talking. I'm going to start a new campaign. And then I'm just going to call this, Summer 41 campaign, something simple. And then the most important thing, I think, when playing with log files is you want to make sure you have a good system to naming the files. And there's many ways you can do it. I think I'm going to call this, I'm going to call it 06, because that's the calendar month of the month that we're starting in. And then I'm going to say it's the second fortnight. I'll just do it the way I normally do it. So it's 0602. And that's not a calendar date. That is just the second fortnight. And then you mention the year. Actually, we'll do the year first, because we're going to probably fight more than 1 year. And then I don't know how I'm going to break up these turns. Probably each video will probably be one turn, I would imagine. And that would probably be the easiest way of doing it. It depends. It depends on how I set up these videos. But I would think that probably the way I'm going to do it the way I normally do it, if I don't talk too much and just make more moves on the board, we can basically do a entire turn per video, I think would be the best way to do it. Or at least an entire month per video. And so with that, I'm just going to start the file. And so now the Vassal engine is recording all the movements. So we're basically logging a turn. And so we're going to start. This is Operation Barbarossa. The Germans have a number of advantages. I probably should have the rule book open. But yeah, they have a number of advantages. They have the advantage of surprise. That's really the main advantage. And on this video, I got to keep in mind that this video is still a tutorial sort of video. So I am going to play slower than I normally would. But hopefully I'm explaining rules as I go. I think it's just an easier way to for me to explain the rules. Also, you can kind of see them live in the moment. But definitely check out the Eurofront manual. Spend some time reading it, of course. Familiarize yourself with, I would say, the units, the way pieces move. Familiarize yourself with like the basics of production. And then, some of the more complicated rules like supplies and naval rules I can make videos on. If you guys want to see that, you can let me know. If whoever watches these videos, if you ever want to see those rules, just let me know, and I'll happily make a tutorial video. But I know which section I'm going to. I'm going to go to the section on nations. And, there's a lot of information on each nation, but here it is, 20.16, Axis surprise. There's a number of advantages. The enemy's HQs are going to be disrupted. Big problem for the Soviet army. They also can assault across like bodies of water, whether it's a river or a sea assault, and they won't be repulsed. So it's a nice advantage for the Germans, especially as we launch a lot of river assaults, as you'll see. And then, it says that fortified ports cannot be surprised. We don't have to worry about that. We're not attacking any fortified ports right now. And then also sea interdiction is nullified. So a lot of this pertains to like invading Norway. And then it also says that if the Axis ever decide to betray another Axis nation, that they lose the surprise effects. Basically, Hitler's diplomacy goes straight down the drain. And believe it or not, they actually had some pretty interesting diplomacy. In fact, this entire operation would surprise the Soviet Union, which goes to show that they had an advantage here in diplomacy, I think. And that's what gave them, I'm not sure how you would quantify that, but the German army seemed to have a bigger thirst for war than the Soviet army did. So anyways, we're going to start. I'm going to try to do it as historically as possible, basically. Or I'll do my own little version of a historical invasion. Not exactly historical. We'll say semi-historical. But I'm going to activate 3 HQs. I'm doing the activation phase, by the way. I'll put that up here. Put it in all caps. But there's different phases of a turn. So it's important that, I'm starting as the Axis. I hope that's obvious. But I'm doing the activation. You can always go to your player aid card and then look here. This column here tells you all the different phases. And so production phase we don't have to worry about because we're starting in the second fortnight. In fact, yeah, no, I think it's fine. Yeah. But basically, what else? Then there's diplomacy phase. We don't have to worry about that either. That's right after production phase. Again, we're doing the second fortnight right now. The first phase is the command phase. So that's the actual phase. It's called not activation phase. It's called command phase. And all you're doing is activating your HQs. These are the ones that are going to be responsible for moving your forces. And so I've activated 3 HQs. Each HQ has a range of 3, indicated by their combat value. So I'm basically in range of all these units, right? Any units within range of either of these 2 field HQs are in range. I also keep in mind that I'm not going to explain these rules every single time. So if you really want to better understand these rules, check out some of my tutorial videos. But this Supreme HQ here, it does not actually have command range. Instead, it has just a limited number of moves, but its range is unlimited. So I can command units in Romania, which is what I'm going to do. And I can also bring up reinforcements. But actually, it's a strategic move. It's a strategic HQ. It's designed for long-range movement. You could think of this as the real, actual command HQ. These other 2 are just like subordinates, each one responsible for a sector of the front. That's the way to think of it. So Army Group Center right now is commanding the upper half of the front. Army Group South is commanding the lower half. Hungary is neutral right now, so they're not activated. And I'm not going to activate any of these units, namely because this HQ here is at a level 1. I would rather activate it at full strength. And that's kind of a rule of thumb. Of course, there are times where you have to activate it, but if you have an opportunity given to you, just by default, always activate your HQs at full strength. That's just what they're designed best to do. But I'm also going to make this Army Group Center HQ a blitz. And so I can indicate that with this marker. And so this thing is going to actually activate twice on this single turn. And so you'll see just in one turn, in one fortnight, which is half a month, I get to use this HQ not once but twice. And that's the power of the blitz. And so we're going to now start moving up our units. I'll probably start with the Panzer Corps, because those are really going to be our flagship units. I'm going to start by setting up a Panzer Corps across the river here. Should I? I might just send actually infantry. Yeah, I'm going to just send infantry across the river there. Do I want to send armor to the south? That's a good question. I think I might want to send just one armored unit. I'll send one, and then I'll send infantry, because I can only send 2 units across this hex, right? And you can always look at the rules as to hex side limits, terrain effects, but depending on if a hex is contested, meaning there's enemy units on the other side, you're limited to how many units you can funnel across that hex. And so these are the rules that I just know, I've kind of had them memorized, but I would like to program them into the game such that, anyone who doesn't actually know how to play the game can have an easier time jumping in. And that's my goal right now. So a lot more programming with that, but stay tuned for that. We're attacking with 2 units. I have no idea how long it's going to take for me to do that. But if anybody wants to work with me, let me know, because I'm just trying to reverse engineer a few things. And if you want to help me, that would be pretty cool. So anyways, you can always send me a message on the YouTube. And then the Discord is the easiest way to reach me. And I should get back to you in at least a week's time, because right now no one's on it, so I don't really check it that much. But you can just send me a message through my comments. So that's probably the easiest way. I see all the comments. Anyways, so I'm sending a small panzer group, 3 divisions to support this infantry group. It's a combined arms formation, which is very, very useful for the German side. But then I'm also going to move up this infantry, and then I'll move up 1 panzer. So I'm moving 2 units on that, but there's another hex side. And actually, I think what I'm going to do is... I'm going to send these 2 panzer groups also into that. So I'm sending 2 units. They have a range of 3, so that's why I can move so far. So now I've got a nice little assembly of armor there ready to break through. And likewise, I can do the same thing and set up an attack to the north. It's also going to be in range. I'll send the 38th Infantry Corps there, and then I'll send these 2 Panzer Corps. Right, it's basically this entire panzer group. It's going to go and attack that northern wing. And then, of course, further north, I can send up to 2 infantry to maybe pin down this unit up here. I guess I can. I'd rather not, because I think it's going to be out of range. So actually, what I'll do instead, I'll send a weaker unit over, because I don't need a lot of troops up there in the north. I need a lot of momentum moving to the west. And the next thing I'll do is I'll stack up whatever infantry I have left over, including this field HQ, and then they will participate in what I hope to be a breakthrough. And then we got this nice bulge here at Bialystok, and I'm just going to go ahead and pin it down with just some German units. Again, I'm respecting the hex side limits. You can see there's a river there, so I can only send 1 unit across a riverside. So I'm only going to send 2 units. 2 full-strength infantry are plenty. In fact, I don't even need to send that much full-strength infantry. I'm going to send this weaker infantry over, because I really don't need to send much more. And actually, that's kind of what I'm going to do here in the south. All these second-tier German units, I'm just going to send them to pin down these units, and then I'm going to send some other infantry to support them. So I just got a bunch of infantry, 7 divisions pinning down these 2 Soviet infantry groups. It'd be great if we can wipe them out, but what I'm really hoping is that if we can break through with an encirclement, I don't have to worry about that, and I should be able to encircle them without a problem. So we'll see how the dice roll go. And then as far as an attack in Army Group South's vicinity, I'm going to actually attack 1 sector with 2 Panzer Corps. And I'm not doing a blitz operation, but I just want to secure this area as soon as possible. Now, I could blitz. I would want to blitz with Army Group South, but I'm actually going to hold off for now, just because I want to save the blitz for the next turn, I think. But that said, I'm going to send some infantry. I'm also going to send the mech units to attack this other Soviet army. Hopefully, we can wipe them out. And then I got 1 more area that I can send across. I'm just going to send full strength infantry. So you can see that Army Group South really doesn't have much in the way of a I don't know. They don't seem to have much in the way of infantry or armored reserve. You know, I've just deployed all of Army Group South, and I have 2 corps as a reserve, and that's it. Not even a full German army. So we're talking as best we can, but you know, as you can see, it's really not a whole lot of troops. Not as many troops as you would think. So I find that interesting. I kind of want to send a Panzer Corps to this northern sector, but I guess I'll hold off for now. And then we have one more Panzer Corps here in reserve that I haven't deployed. I could use it against Bialystok, which I think is probably my best, you know, best move. Miles will attack it in full force, and then yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. Just stack up. So I'm attacking with 1 Panzer column, a bunch of infantry. We'll see how well they do. And then as far as reserve, Army Group North looks like has an infantry reserve army, but Army Group Center has nothing as far as infantry reserve, at least nothing that can easily deploy to the front line, which I actually don't like. I want to have more units stacked up, ready to march as part of that breakthrough. So I'm not going to attack Bialystok. I'm going to actually keep all these columns just stacked up immediately behind what I hope to be a good breakthrough. And I have this one more Panzer Corps. I don't know if I should send it to maybe here. Yeah, I mean, maybe I just leave this infantry back, and then I'm going to move up this 47th Corps instead and attack Rodno. So it's an ambitious gamble, but we'll see if it pays off. We also have air support, and air support is really going to be the main, I think, game changer of this operation. Keep in mind that each of the HQs has air support, and so each of them is going to have a air support of 3, and each one is in a range of 3. OKH actually has a range of 6 because it's a Supreme HQ, so it's doubled. For some reason, they have it doubled. But the regular field HQs are a range of 3. I'm going to stack the air support here, and I can place a airstrike right there. So Panzer and air power is a nice combination. I'm also going to stack another one right here. And we're going to stack, if it will allow me, put another airstrike there. So technically the airstrike, you can think of it as a 5th unit that's supporting the battle. And then I'm going to put also an airstrike right here. That can be OKH's air support. So we have a lot of air support. Now there's a few more moves I want to do, which I've done all the regular army moves, field moves. I want to do some supreme moves, and I want to basically deal with some deployments here in the south. First of all, I'm going to deploy 2 units, Romanian army and a German corps, infantry corps. They're going to actually cross this river, the Danube River, and actually just start making a little bit of progress towards Odessa. My objective right now with Army Group A is to take Odessa, then I can actually unlock a Romanian unit, and it can march into the Eastern Front. And so I'm doing that, but then I also am going to bring up some reinforcements. So that's technically 2 moves. I can also move OKH. I can use the OKH HQ and move units on the Western Front, because it's located at Warsaw. And Warsaw is just one of those, they call them, they have a term for it, but it's like a flex point, basically. It commands 2 regions, but it's going to command the other region at half efficiency, meaning that for every regular move on the Western Front, it's going to cost me 2 supreme moves. So I have 6 supreme moves altogether. I've done 2 already. I have 4 left. But if they're going to be Western Front moves, that's only going to leave me with 2 moves that I can do on the Western Front. And the idea is to basically move Western Front units around. So I'm going to move this Panzer Corps, and we can move it through Hungary or Transylvania, because it's going to be Hungary is cooperating. It's a cooperating neutral nation, which is another rule. But basically, cooperating allows you to move units across. I got to find that rule in the actual rule book, but it allows you to actually move units across neutral nations, depending which faction you play as. but there's a whole section in the game that talks about belligerence. It talks about how units actually join, and it talks about diplomacy. I think it's war and peace. And if you go in this war and peace section, here it is, 16.2 cooperation. Tells you about the effects. You basically can move units through that national territory by rail, but you cannot actually leave those units in that nation. So Hungary and Transylvania, I can basically use their rail lines to move this German Panzer Corps via rail to a deployment base or deployment zone. There's another term for it, assembly point. But we're essentially moving this entire core 3 panzer divisions, and we're actually going to move them into Romania. There's also a capacity to how many units can actually operate in these pro-Axis nations, and you're only allowed to have 4 German units in any single nation. That's another rule, and I believe it's part of the War and Peace alliance reactions, diplomatic events. Talks about land satellites. So I actually don't see it here. So it's not actually in the 16.0 War and Peace section. But if we scroll down, and if I go to Eurofront, Medfront, these are the fronts. And I was talking about minor powers. Now it's talking about the major powers. France, Soviet Union, I saw Britain, US, Italy. 20.1 is Germany. And it may talk about it here. The German forces, command and supply, unit restrictions. Here it is, 20.132, occupation limits. And it talks about Axis minors, including Romania, or it could be Bulgaria or Finland. It says no more than 4 German units can be inside the territory of an Axis minor unless the Allied Soviet units have entered its territory. So right now we're dealing with the 1941 border of Romania, which is this gray line. So since this 30th Corps has actually crossed that border, it's now entering annexed Soviet territory. Now I can move up 1 more unit. So I'm still obeying that occupation limit. I'm not breaking it because 1 unit went out and then 1 unit's gone in. So that still leaves me with 2 supreme moves left. And I'm not sure which unit I actually want to move up. As you can see, pretty much all the Western Front units, if you saw my last video, you know that pretty much all the Western Front units that Germany has are under strength. So they're pretty much all under strength, including this infantry. But I think what I'm going to do is just go ahead and move up this mech corps. I think that's what I want to do, is just move up a mech corps and move it up. Or I could also decide to move up, Romanian ground units if I wanted to, move up a Romanian army. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and move up a mech unit. The question is where do I want to put it? And I think I'll just move it as part of the Reserve Corps of Army Group South, I guess. And then these are just going to be mobile infantry. But we're moving through Hungary. Keep in mind that rail moves are 10. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. I can actually go back and show you the full path. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Boom, 10. So I got it moving to the front line. And then that should be enough. I mean, I have still 2 more infantry corps I can move up, another mech corps, but I'm going to wait because I want to build them up to full strength. I decided to move up this mech unit because I want to have as many mobile units as possible. And so that's going to now complete our command phase. We also just completed the movement phase. Right, that everything you saw there was the movement phase, as the name suggests. But now we can move on to the combat phase. And this is the phase that everybody loves, right? This is like our favorite phase. And so I'm actually gonna I normally should probably leave these blue indications on as far as movement. But another thing I can do to indicate units that won't participate in movement, I'm actually just gonna turn them off, right? But the only areas now that I need to focus on are the areas that are newly contested, not old contested areas, which technically there were none since neither of these nations were at war until this turn. And so we're now going to go ahead. This is a very long turn, by the way. This is given how the front has just woken up with combat. But yeah, we'll just dive in. I probably should like create some sort of background animation effect, right? Maybe I should, just do something to kind of give it a little bit more zing and pop, right? So like, let's just do like World War II combat sounds. Sometimes these videos I think are a little cheesy, if you ask me, but sometimes they're pretty good. So we'll see. We'll play a little bit of that. Hopefully, the copyrights are okay. This is maybe just from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, but it should work. Just create an immersion. Now this is the combat phase. This is the phase that we all are here for as war gamers. This is our favorite phase. It comes down to the dice roll. So we're gonna start our battles. I don't know. Can you guys even hear that? Oh yeah, you definitely can. Okay, good. It might be too loud. I think it's fine, right? Oh, it sounds amazing. I'm gonna lower this a little bit. Oh, and then actually I'm gonna turn it off for myself. Yeah, because you can hear it from my the desktop audio creates a terrible echo. I just realized. So I'm gonna stop that. I'm gonna have to put on headphones, which I don't have. So we'll save that for future content. But I'm just gonna go ahead and just do it without any noise. But if you can use your imagination, this is what we're here for, right? Is the dice roll. So let's do it. Keep in mind that any battle zones that are within command range of an HQ are going to have regular like offensive combat support, and you really want that when you're attacking. If you don't have combat support, your dice are basically their effectiveness is essentially halved, and that in the way that's demonstrated is by this effect called double defense. The defender is basically going to absorb more hits, and so you want combat support when you're attacking. I think it's basically, you can think of it as like local artillery support. You can think of it as like local air support. No major heavy airstrikes apparently, but you're getting extra support that is going to give your ground forces that extra firepower they need to break through. They're also going to gain like probably extra supplies of logistics, extra ammunition, etc. So the way you do the battle, we're going to unhide both sides. Defenders always get to roll first in this game. I guess they kind of have the first advantage of surprise, first point of contact. This is a mech unit. You can look here at the stats. Look at a mech unit, see their firepower. It says double fire for defense, single fire for offense. And so they get to score hits with double fire on a 5 or 6, not just on 6s. So we roll 2, and they scored 1 hit because it was a 5. And then I'm going to reduce the strongest German unit. Now we get to roll those infantry. They're going to roll single fire because they're only infantry. Offensively they only have, you can see here, single fire. Offense and defense, the infantry are always single fire. But they're going to have combat support, so for every hit I get, if I get 2 hits, I can wipe out this entire Soviet mech core group. So let's do it. We scored 1 hit. We scored 2 5s there, but again, this is just infantry. All right, and then we're just going to continue like that and just keep a track of all the rules. So we have another Soviet army. This is the 8th Army. They score 1 hit, single fire dice rolls. We're going to put it on the infantry. This is why you always want to attack with strong infantry. I don't want the Panzer Corps taking hits. You can look at the costs. A infantry cost for the Axis is 4 production points, but an armored cost is 8 production points. Literally, the Panzers are twice as good, but twice as costly. So I don't want to lose Panzer Corps. I don't want to take any hits there. So we'll start with the Panzer Corps, and they get to roll 7 dice with double fire. I score a 5, a 6, and a 6. So that's 3 hits, just enough to remove and eliminate this entire 8th Army. And just like that, we've already broken through. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right, here's another battle. And we're going to we'll go ahead and reveal both sides, but before the defenders get to roll first, the airstrikes actually get to roll before the defenders do. And if you look at the German airstrike for 1941, summer 1941, on the Eastern Front, it's triple fire. Okay? So they get to score hits on not just 5 and 6, but also 4, 5, and 6, meaning that we have a 50% chance of scoring 1.5 hits, which, again, it's a probability roll. So let's see what the air power does. They score one hit there against the Soviet 11th Army, a very strong army. They get to roll. They score no hits. No, they don't have triple fire or double fire. And now we have this giant stack of infantry and panzers to roll. 12 panzer divisions. Let's start with those. 1, 2, and boom. Already with the first 2 rolls, we've scored enough hits. 3 hits with double fire. And we've eliminated the 11th Soviet army. So we've already taken out 2 armies. And we've weakened a Soviet mech corps, or destroyed one of the 2 Soviet mech corps that were there. Basically Soviet mech divisions, but we'll call them corps because that's how the Soviets organized their formations. So we've already achieved a breakthrough. So now you're going to see the next turn, textbook blitz. We're doing the next operation here. River crossing at Grodno. We don't have to worry about any repulse. And so I'm going to roll the air power. They get to score 1 hit, looks like. Soviet tank army, or I guess these are technically 2 tank divisions that are there. They score no hits, thank goodness. And then now we have the Panzers, up to the Panzer Corps. There's 4 Panzer divisions. Can we score another hit? Boom, we score 2 actually. And we've just taken out yet another Soviet unit. This time it was, I think we'll call it Soviet mech, either mech group. Technically that's not what the Soviets call them, but the scale of this game is such that these divisions are not independent. So, that's those are 2 Soviet tank divisions. And I believe Soviet tank divisions, or rather Soviet tank corps. It's hard to say. I think this actually was a corps. I believe this whole entire unit is a corps. So technically those units were Soviet divisions. Over here, though, these are more than just Soviet tank corps. It's hard to say. I think for simplicity, I'm just going to call them tank corps and mech corps, right? Just for the sake of simplicity, even though it may not be accurate. But that's how the Soviets are just confusing like that. And then they're not armies. They're not tank armies. I know that much. But we're going to send this back to the Soviet force pool. So we've broken through on 3 sectors now. We've got a few more fight battles now to go on. Here we have the 3rd Soviet Army. It's reported by the 6th Cavalry Division, basically. It's only level 1. So let's see what we got here. It may have been 6th Cavalry Corps. At this point, I've been trying to study this so much and trying to scale it with this game. Unfortunately, this game is just too big of a scale to kind of show you the subtle nuances of the sheer diversity of the Soviet formations. But this game does a great job at showing the German formations very easily. But the Soviet ones, it's a little bit more confusing. But this right now is a Soviet Cavalry Corps that only has 1 division, which is pretty confusing. And there are going to be definitely Cavalry Corps that are part of Soviet armies that are not showed in this game, in the same way that you have Soviet mech divisions or tank divisions, or even mech corps or tank corps. I don't think the Soviets had tank corps. They had mech corps that were part of the Soviet armies, but you don't see them here. So there's actually a lot of missing Soviet units in the game. That's what I'm trying to say. So with that said, we're just going to continue on. Either way, it's single fire, 4 Soviet single fire. They score 1 hit. Put it on the infantry there. That was I believe that was the 6th German Infantry Corps. We're going to roll the Panzer Corps first. They score no hits, followed by the infantry. The infantry scores 1 hit. Boom. Put that on the Soviet infantry. Got another battle here. 10th Soviet Army versus 2 German Corps. Soviets score 1 hit. The German infantry roll. They score 1 hit as well. Touche. And then we're just going to go down the line here. A few more army battles. This is like essentially World War I style battles. Pretty much the same armies. Technology hasn't changed that much. These armies, I think the Soviet 10th Army had a few of those mech corps, but most of them are breaking down anyways. But here, the 4th Soviet Army scores no hits. German corps get to roll. They score no hits either. So pretty uneventful battles, as I kind of expected. Here we got the Soviet 9th Corps, and we're going to roll. It scores 2 hits. Ouch. So there's 44th Corps, and then the 8th Corps. Both are going to take a hit. So one of our infantry already is like at level 2. That's not good. You don't want to see that. And then we only scored 1 hit. We did not neutralize the 9th Corps. But now we're starting to approach some of the more dense battles, slightly more Soviet and German units. So we'll see how these battles go. Starting with this one here, we only are attacking with German infantry, but we're facing off Soviet 5th Army as well as the 4th Soviet Mech Corps. We'll start with the Soviet Mech Corps first. Ooh, they scored 2 hits. Yeah, and then the infantry scored 2 hits. So that was a pricey battle for the Germans. They just lost 4 divisions, and then they retaliate. They can score 1 hit. So that's a juicy place for maybe a Soviet counteroffensive. We'll see. We also got another battle here in the south. We're fighting for the sector of Lvov, town of Lvov. That's a major town. We're starting with the airstrike. We also have 2 Panzer Corps. See how the airstrike goes. Scores 2 hits against the Soviet 6th Army. So the Soviet 6th Army now is at 50% strength as well. They get to roll 2, scoring no hits. Now let's see what the Panzer Corps can do. And they score 1 hit only. Interesting. So the 6th Army is not done yet. Another battle here against the 26th Soviet Army. And we're attacking with 1 infantry corps supported by a lot of motorized and Panzer Corps. We're going to roll 2 for the defenders. No hits there. The Panzer Corps gets double fire. They score 1 hit. And then the mech only has single fire attacking. Infantry will have single fire, so that's 7 dice rolls. They actually did not score another hit. Dang nabbit. So the Soviet armies are still alive, and we don't want to see that. We want to see these units destroyed, especially the weak ones. But I did not blitz with Army Group South, so that's it for Army Group South. They're not blitzing, so they cannot do any combat support for these other formations. We'll also got to deactivate OKH. OKH does not have combat support neither. So we're deactivating it there as well. But we only have 1 HQ that does have combat support and is still being active, and it's the Blitz HQ. And so now we're into the Blitz phase. You can now look at here. We've done the command phase, we've done the movement phase, we've done combat phase, and we're now doing the Blitz phase. And the Blitz phase essentially is a rinse and a repeat of the movement and combat phases, but except it's now concentrated at a more limited sector. Most of the other sectors are deactivated, right? And so I can call this Blitz phase. I'm just going to call it Blitz because it's technically more than 1 phase, but it's Blitz movement and some combat, as you'll see. But the way you do it is you just delete the Blitz marker, and then you reduce this to HQ, and then now this is your new command HQ. And so notice how this HQ is at level 2 now, so it only has a command range of 2. So I can command units that are within 2 range. For example, these units to the north, they're not in command range. So I cannot actually support that battle, right? So the infantry are going to need to score 2 6s in order to destroy this Soviet unit, not just 1. So that's the limitations of the Blitz phase, is that your units are now a lot more limited in where they can go. But this is overall not too bad, because I got this big cluster of reserve, basically 2 reserve German armies that I'm going to use to break out and try to encircle as many Soviet formations as we can. That's the idea. And so, yeah, I can like move out this Panzer Corps, for example, and I can move it around and put it there. And it basically is going to cut off all these other Soviet units from their supply lines. That's the idea. And then I'm going to show you a little bit of supplies in the next turn. But I also got to point out how command range works. It does not go through enemy-controlled territory. And right now, these two areas are still Soviet-controlled. So I cannot command the 52nd or the 12th Corps, because even though they're 2 hexes away, they can't go through enemy. The command range, right? The lines of communication cannot go through enemy territory. So I cannot command the southern units, basically. So that's just something to point out. But I'm going to detach the 43rd Corps, just have it start marching, because I have enough units to pin down the Soviet 10th Army and the Soviet 3rd Army. Basically, I don't need them. I don't need any more units. They can't actually disengage right now, because all the other areas around them are enemy controlled. They can only disengage into friendly controlled areas. And I just cut off that last avenue just now with the 46th Corps that you see there. And so that's the idea of the encirclement. But I can also move up more units. Most of my foot soldiers are going to have to march. And unfortunately, they're not in range of actually attacking any sectors, right? That's the problem with these infantry. They only march 2. If they could march 3, if they were motorized, I could have attacked Minsk right now with the infantry. But I can't. I can attack with the Panzer Corps, but I don't want to do that because the Panzer Corps are just simply too valuable. And I don't want them attacking an area that is heavily defended that I can just go around. And I want to preserve their strength as much as I can. But as you'll see, the Panzer Corps are really the main units that can really penetrate deep into enemy territory. And so the real question I have is, do I want to engage these remnant Soviet units? And if I was playing it fully historically, I would absolutely engage these remnant units. Because in my eyes, I'm thinking the Soviet army doesn't have any more strategic reserve, right? We've pretty much wiped out. The German army thought the Soviets had about 50 divisions of reserve, when in reality the Soviets had more like at least 200, if not more. They were able to deploy 800. So not the best units, but 800 ground units nonetheless. And that was thanks to their powerful reserves. I can also make a move against Riga if I want. And I'm going to try to actually capture, if I can, the Soviet HQ. So I don't know. I mean, I wish I had more German infantry. I do have a huge wall of German infantry that I can send forth. But the problem is that these infantry are just too slow. They're not in range. They can't even attack the second Soviet defensive line. And that's the fundamental problem I have with the Soviets right now, is that I can't simply attack the areas that I want to attack. So I can attack with this German Panzer Corps and go for Riga. But, I mean, it may lead to heavy casualties. And I don't want to do that. I'd rather send my Panzer Corps. I'm going to send them just right over there and send them as a cluster. And then I can also move forward this Army Group North. It did not activate, so it can move in the blitz phase. But as you can see, I mean, I've broken through. But now Army Group North is kind of going to get diluted. The German drive will dilute itself as the front gets wider and wider. So there are pros to breaking through, but there are strategic cons. But right now, we're not going to go for Minsk. I'm going to try to encircle Minsk on the next turn. My goal right now is just to make sure that I have just as much mass, as many troops as I can marching eastward. And with enough strategic momentum, I can encircle the Soviet army. And so what I'm also going to do is deactivate Army Group Center, since it's not going to participate in any battles. And it's not really in range to participate in any battles. I'm going to deactivate it and just have it march forward. And actually, I don't know if I want to actually put my Army Group HQ there, or maybe I can put it in Grodno, because on the following turn, I might be able to command some more units to the south. I don't know. I think we're good. We're good with what we've got so far. And then, there was one more battle that I forgot to do, and that usually happens. Probably should have done that before the Blitz, but it was this battle here. Well, against one cavalry division. Of course, the cavalry division scores a hit. Fantastic. We're going to put it on the Romanian 4th Army, rather. Oh, but we score 3 hits. That's more than enough. And we just neutralized that unit, so that's pretty cool. Boom. So we actually did a successful river crossing there. and it's going to help us for further future operations as we make our way towards Odessa. And then I can also do another round of combat. Even though I don't have combat support, I can still do another round of combat. We're not going to attack here because the Soviets actually are stronger, and you don't want to. Very rarely is attacking a enemy formation that's bigger than your own usually going to work. And this. Keep in mind, these numbers measure combat power. They actually don't measure the number of troops. Soviet armies were always larger than the German corps equivalent. But we will try to attack this unit here. See if we can destroy this 9th army or mech corps. We'll see. No hits. No hits on either side. We are going to attack the 6th army here with our Panzer Corps. They did not score a hit, but we need 2 hits. And boom, we just were able to score a 6 and a 5. And so that's 2 hits, but against double defense, it's enough. So we have actually secured Lvov, which is really nice. But we still haven't cut off the 26th Army here because technically the Soviets... Oh, actually we have. Actually we did. So we actually don't need to attack there. This unit's going to be out of supplies anyways, and you'll see why in a moment. But that's going to conclude the German first phase of Operation Barbarossa. We got a few more battles to do. One more battle here. And let's see what it is. We got a 1st Soviet mech corps. It does not score any hits against these 2 German mech corps of their own. 8 German divisions. Man, they scored 3 hits. If they scored 4, they would have wiped them out completely. But yeah, that unit's going to be reduced by 1. And then that concludes the fighting. So overall, pretty interesting advance. The German Panzer Corps are going all in. But now we can check the supply phase of this turn. And that's really like the last major thing. One of the last major things you're going to do after the combat phase and the blitz phase is the supply phase. And the supply phase is super important. And so we're going to do that. But the thing about supply phase is that you're always checking the enemy supplies. The actual units here have like, I don't know, I guess like a 24-hour notice. These units do not suffer supplies until the end of the enemy's supply phase. And so when we finish the Soviet turn, we will see the German supply situation. So we're focusing on the Soviet supplies, and the way we're going to check that is look for the Soviet railheads, which is really the furthest distance that the Soviets can safely move their rail lines, and by extension their rail units. And it's going to be anywhere where they control the rail, where they control the hex that has the rail line, even if that hex is contested. And so right now I'm seeing that it's this town here of Luk. I think it's pronounced Lutsk or Lusk, right over here in western Ukraine, and the Soviets still control that area. So that's going to be a Soviet rail line. And then there's another rail line over here, of course. And then you might be thinking that there may be some rail lines here in the south, but the answer is no, because the Germans took Lvov. And so Lvov actually now is German controlled. These rail lines, if you follow them, they're going to go into Hungary. That's enemy controlled, or at least neutral, and it favors the Axis. Likewise, if you continue these rail lines that go kind of southeast, they eventually run into Romanian territory. And so the Soviets control Sevnati, but they do not control Jassy. And so, the rail lines basically lead to enemy-controlled sectors. And so these rail lines do not trace their origins all the way back to Moscow. And that is the origin source, is Moscow. And so, but these 2 rail lines here, one in Lutsk, the other in Ternopil, these 2 rail lines can trace their way back all the way to Moscow, all the way back to Moscow over here. And then similar situation we're dealing here in the west, right? The Soviet rail lines do go to Minsk because, although these areas, Borisov and Orsha, technically Orsha is enemy control right now because of the zone of control. There is a zone of control rule, and I guess I should pull that up right now. But basically, it's not just the immediate area; it's also the empty space between units that also indicates who controls those territories. And so, this is some of the first things you learn about when it comes to movement. One of the first things you're learning about these units, it's the zone of control rules, really. But they're near the movement. Here it talks about command range, I believe. Talks about movement here. Talks about battles. Talks about how battles play out. Different types of battles. Here's hex control. I guess this is the area that I was looking, the little animation that I was looking for. But it tells you like which of these areas are enemy controlled. I think it's easier just to use these like markers. Blue markers are going to be axis controlled. Yellow markers are going to be neither controlled, like contested hexes when it comes to zone of control. And then red markers would indicate Soviet controlled, right? And so right now, Vitebsk is Soviet controlled. All these other areas are Soviet controlled because of the river line. River line blocks the zone of control of these Panzer Corps. So the Soviets still control Vitebsk, but they do not control Orsha because they don't have any Soviet units on the opposite side of the river to help contest. But the Soviets do control Minsk, and Minsk is uncontested. And so it is actually, its zone of control is actually competing with these two Panzer zone of control for Borisov. So you can think of it as both sides have some recon units in that sector, right? Same thing with Pinsk over here. Both sides kind of are competing for a zone of control there as well. But this is important when we're checking the rail supply of some Soviet units. So for example, the Soviet mech group here is in supplies. These Soviet units to the far north are also in supplies. This unit here is actually in supplies because you still got this rail line that goes all the way back to this naval base or naval port. And this naval port can trace supplies through the friendly controlled bodies of water. The Soviets control the naval bases of Riga and Tallinn. So whoever controls the naval bases controls the bodies of water. So these are all friendly. These are all Soviet controlled areas, okay? And so the supply lines of this unit is right now very tenuous, right? This area is actually blue. It is axis controlled. This unit right now, because it's contested, does not influence any other hex. Contested units cannot lose their zone of control. They're like restricted to just the battle hex. But you can see that if the Germans were just to send one more unit forward and then control this port, this unit would be completely out of supplies. Or if they take Riga and they control this body of water, then they would also be out of supplies. This other body of water here is being controlled by the Danzig, which is German controlled, right? So this would be a German controlled body of water. And so I'm just trying to just go over the zone of control rules. I kind of do these in my head already, but it's just good to know. That's something that you're always keeping your eyes open for. And this is why I would want to program this game, because you can maybe create a feature where you can turn that on or off, and you can see like the actual zone of control live in the moment. I think that would be a great feature. But anyways, so the zone of control is not going to really affect these Soviet units that are further east, but they are going to affect all these Soviet units that have been encircled. And right now, the only nearest railhead we have is this one. And keep in mind, the supplies has to go through friendly controlled or neutral controlled areas. They cannot go through enemy controlled areas. And so right now, the rail range is 2 hexes by default. And so right now, the 4th Army is receiving supplies, right? Because it's in 2 hex range of the railheads. And by the way, you can learn more about these rules if you just go to supply section in the game. It talks about supply origin. The supply origin is what's indicated by that rail marker. But then you want to see the actual, supply range. Let's see if we can find it. There's also different types of supply sources. You want to have units that are in rail supply. Somewhere tells you that it has to be within 2 hexes away. I think it's called supply lines. Yeah, supply lines are 2 hexes, no more than 2 hexes long, connecting it to a supply source. So the railhead is a supply source, and the rail lines are friendly controlled areas. And so the 4th Army is in supplies, but the 10th Army and the 3rd Army are not. And so I'm going to actually switch over to the supply, to the Soviet side. I'm actually going to just finish up the, I think I can place no supply markers. Yep. So this guy here, for example, is out of supplies. These guys here are also going to be out of supplies. Strategic movement spent. What is this? Oh, nice. We have a marker to indicate strategic movement. I love that. I love that. I love that. That's a super cool feature. But yeah, basically, 3 Soviet units are right now out of supplies. Everybody else is in supplies. I can put a few more Soviet railheads if I want to. You know, put a railhead. I'll just do that just for the sake of. This is how it would look like if you actually played the game in person. Do the bare minimum, but that's going to sum up the Axis turns in on the Eastern Front. I should also keep in mind that I'm playing on the whole game, so let me do some extra Axis moves as well. I should have done this before the Blitz and all this, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I'll at least respect each theater of action, but I'm going to play it smart with the Axis. I'm not going to actually leave these units here in Africa. I'm actually going to pull them out because yes, I can take Tobruk, but I just don't have enough firepower right now to take Tobruk. Maybe this unit was at level 3, but it's at level 2. I just don't think they're strong enough. So I'm actually going to activate the Africa HQ. Also going to activate this HQ. I'm actually going to have this HQ, I think, fall back probably to Bars. I think is what I want. And then we're going to move the 10th Army. You know, keep in mind that the movements in the desert are different. If they're not moving via roads, if they're just moving straight through the deserts, their movements are reduced by 1. So this 10th Army can only move 1. I guess another way to do it, if I keep it on this road, it gets to move 2 like that. And this mech group can move 3, but, you know, I'm actually going to leave it on the road as well. Boom. It gets to move 3. And in this way, I'm just stacking up all my units, creating a much stronger defense, I hope, of right here. And the idea is that I'm able to pull back this Italian army in one piece. It's the Italian army that's really the most vulnerable. But we're still, yeah, I think we should be relatively safe. And then I think I'm going to pull back. I guess I'm going to pull back the Panzer Corps as well. I don't know if I want to pull back the Panzer Corps or not. I think I do. So I'm just going to do that. And hopefully this Italian formation is strong enough to withstand any British attack. But right now the British are out of range. So I'm not even worried about that right now. But yeah. So we're going to do that. Deactivate the HQ. The reason why I activated this Italian HQ is because this is a militia unit. And the militia unit can only be moved through a Supreme HQ. This, by the way, is not a field HQ, indicated by this 4-leaf clover. It is a theater HQ, which is basically a mini Supreme HQ. So it has unlimited range, but it can only command 1 unit at a time, which is really unfortunate. And this one doesn't even have combat support. So this Italian HQ is completely useless for all I care, but it just goes to show that the Italian army was a lot less mobile than the other German armies in the British armies of World War II. Basically a World War I army level mobility. Super slow. Super slow in this game. So anyways, we're now going to switch over to the... so finish that. I'm not doing any Western Front moves for the Germans. I barely can. Not without under strength HQ, I can't. So yeah, we're going to go ahead, switch over to the Soviets. And then we are going to do the Soviet side. And then I'm going to wrap up this turn. But yeah, hold on. Make sure I'm playing as the right Soviet faction. I'm making sure I did not forget my password here. Did not, thank goodness. All right, so now I get to have the luxury of hiding these Soviet units because they're still in their home territory. Defender units get to hide. So it's a little fog of war element. Even these units that are out of supplies, I get to hide. I guess I won't. But the German units here are not hidden anymore because they're in basically attack positions. So they're not hidden. That's just the general rule of thumb. This Soviet unit is also out of supplies. Forgot. Well, although it's 2 hexes away from this railhead, it has to go through this enemy-controlled hex, and it's simply not in range, and it can't go around because it's not the supply range is too far. So these units, this unit here, all the Soviet units that are, let me organize the Soviet dead pile while I'm at it. But all these Soviet units that are out of supplies are reduced by 1. And if they're already at 1, they basically disappear. They get removed from the board. And so this guy, he's going to be reduced to 2. Still alive though. This cavalry unit, for example, though, he's going to be removed. And then this level 3, it's going to go down to level 1. And so yeah, these Soviet pocket here is not looking good. It's going to get liquidated pretty soon. But as far as everywhere else, the Germans have achieved a breakthrough in the gateway of the Ukraine from Poland. So now, as the Soviets, we got to figure out how we're going to deploy our forces in such a way that we can actually establish a good defense. And this is the challenge for the Soviets, right? It's being able to respond to these incredible German breakthroughs and achieve a good defense. And keep in mind that all the Soviet HQs right now are going to be disrupted. And that's the real problem the Soviets have. These HQs are disrupted, meaning that they are 1 level less effective than they normally could be. And this really cripples the Soviet HQ abilities. It really does. And it even affects the Soviet Stavka, which is the supreme HQ that they have. Right? And so normally the Supreme HQ here, all the way in Moscow, could deploy 6 units across the front. Now it can only do 4. And so we only have so many units that we can move around. So I got to figure out what the game plan is here. Okay? And I really got to figure out something quick, because the Germans they've broken through and they're making deep progress towards Moscow, and that's my main concern right now. So if I was smart, I'm definitely activating Stavka. And I think I just want to rail move my Western Front HQ. I just want to rail move it I want it to be at full strength. That's the idea. So I know that I probably should activate it, but I won't. I'm just going to rail move it to Bryansk. And that's going to be like our new field HQ position. Maybe I should put it at Smolensk. It's hard to say what's a better position. But I think Bryansk is relatively safe. But I need to bring up reinforcements. Oh, and the other thing I forgot to mention is that now that the Germans have declared war, I actually get to now deploy my strategic reserve. Or the reserve armies. They say they arrive immediately upon belligerence. And so we get to deploy a bunch of Soviet reserves. Now these units are extremely weak. They're all at level 1. But I do get some more reinforcements, which is nice. So here's Bryansk. We had a unit there. There's a unit in Kalinin. Got a lot of units in the south. Stalino is over here. Dnipropetrovsk over here. Kharkov. These are all Soviet Union cities. That's how they named them. Obviously very different in the situation today, but keep in mind this is 1941. Sevastopol, another army, and then we got a couple more. One in Rostov over here, and then we have one more in Archangel way out there. So the idea is I want to deploy these units. Now these other Soviet reinforcements, they actually don't arrive. They arrive in the following production after belligerence, so they're not going to arrive until the production phase. So that's something to keep in mind. But already, for example, the Germans have breached the Dvina River. So I don't know what to do about that. I kind of just want to abandon Rostov, frankly, and pull back as many armies, pull back my HQ if I can, move it back to Leningrad. Try to get this army marching to Leningrad. That's the idea. So I'm going to activate this HQ. And then I think we're going to do something like that. And then I can deactivate it and then move it that way. So it was, even though it was deactivated, its command range was 1, so I could still command the range unit Riga, but I can also move through enemy controlled territory. That's not a problem. So yeah, we're pulling out Riga, and I'm trying to just establish a new defensive line. And really, I want this HQ to actually, like, you know, I think I may even activate the Leningrad HQ and try to, like, deploy these units as well. The idea being that I just can create like a secondary defensive echelon that can hopefully slow down the Germans as they make their way towards Leningrad. Now, of course, Leningrad is vulnerable from the north right now. But I'm going to, I think I'm actually going to have this HQ fall back here. But I'm going to deploy a Soviet reserve in Leningrad, so that do not worry about that. So yeah. You just got to be efficient with your HQ moves. So this was an HQ move. I can put a strategic movement spent. So that's 1. I love that icon. It's so cool. They really did a great job of updating that. So that's 1 rail move. I can move 3 more. I only have 3 more. Now I could defend Minsk. I think I kind of want to defend Minsk. It's going to be just a very important rail line for the Soviets and for the Germans. And keep in mind that the current German rail lines, you know, they're actually out here. They're somewhere near Vilna, because you can see they took all this territory, so they actually can trace their rail lines. They can't chase them through Bialystok, but they can chase them from Prussia right now. So they do have some forward rail lines. I could have even counterattacked if I wanted to. I don't know if a counterattack would really slow them down. I could maybe use the 13th Army to maybe try to attack Molodechno. There's only 1 unit there, and it may slow down the Germans. Be kind of a weird place to attack, but, you know, I could also, I'm not going to attack with these armies now, but the 13th Army is in a position to counterattack. So maybe I do make an attack on Molodechno. The only problem is that it's going to be completely out of supplies. It's going to be cut off. Unless this army can hold out. So I don't know. I don't know if I want to hold on to Minsk. I can also pull back this 4th Mech group, leave it at Borisov. And in this way, I can ensure that the Germans are going to have to cross these this foresty line, which only has a hex side of 1. And it's going to, you know, the Germans are going to have to either attack Minsk directly or encircle it in order before they get access to this river line. It's going to at least slow them down. It may give me a little bit of time to bring up some reinforcements. The only problem I see is that Orsha is not going to be, it's going to be a gaping hole in Orsha. So maybe I move up the 20th Army and put it there. Although even then, that army seems to be pretty vulnerable. So it's hard to say. I'd rather abandon Minsk altogether and then send the 13th Army to Mogilev if I could. So that'd be, I mean, I've already done 2. This technically was not it was not a rail move, but it was a strategic movement. Technically, this wasn't a rail, though. It was an operational move. But this one, yeah, both of these are operational moves. I can only move up 1 more unit. I don't know if I want to try to counterattack. Maybe I just want to try to counterattack. But of course, that leaves the southern flank of Minsk vulnerable. So I want to hold on to Borisov. I'm trying to set up these like defensive positions. But I think we need 1 more unit there. That's the only problem I see. I would like to have 1 more unit there. Question is what unit would that be? Could also move up this mech units to support. It's probably my best bet, but that's going to leave this southern flank a little vulnerable. But we'll see. 1, 2, 3. That's 4 strategic moves. And I'm just trying to create a wall between us and the Germans. And hopefully I have enough reserves. I have a few more Soviet at least 3 more Soviet armies that I could deploy around here. And we want to do that to slow down any Soviet attempt, or any attempt by the Germans to breach the Dnieper River defensive line. That's the idea. So this is the Battle of Smolensk, essentially. Very interesting historical battle. Highly recommend reading David Glantz's book. That's kind of the last book I was really reading, other than When Titans Clash. And so much data there. It's going to take me a while to unpack that book for sure. But I will do it at some point, definitely. So anyways, we've pretty much finished dealing with the northern front or the western front. We've lost our immediate sector, and I'm trying to fall back and establish new defensive echelons. That's the idea. The only problem I see right now with the setup I have is that Veliki Luki is unprotected. And I kind of want to, I'm concerned that the Germans will be able to flood through Veliki Luki. So actually, this mech unit, armored unit, needs to move to Veliki Luki. I need to send it way down there. And yeah, that's the only change I'm going to make. I want to make sure I have a static line across the whole front. So we've already finished our Stavka moves. We have no more Stavka moves. Unbelievable. Very unfortunate. But I've decided to prioritize the Western Front. And we should be looking really strong on the next turn once this HQ is at full strength. So that's that. Only other thing I'm going to do is now activate this Ukrainian HQ here. And then I'm going to try to pull back some units. This cavalry unit, for example, I'm going to actually have it move back like way over here. Because the southern flank, I don't have Zlo being defended. Maybe I should send them right over here. 1, 2, 3, right there. Yeah. And just hope that the Germans don't march to these other sectors. That's probably my best move overall. And then I'm also going to pull back the Soviet mech group here. Might as well have them pull back. I kind of wish I could move back this 9th mech corps, but I can't. The nice thing about this mech unit is that it can withdraw, and there are rules about withdrawing that are important to take note of when you're withdrawing units. They're not the same thing as regular retreats or regular combat rolls, because you basically, the dice roll comes down to who is the faster unit. And so the rule of thumb, if I can find it, supplies, overview, talking about production, it should talk about it in movement, I would think. Not just repulse. That's about river assaults or amphibious assaults. We're also talking about movement. Here it goes, rear guards. And so rear guard remains in the battle, but the idea is if you have a faster unit, whichever unit is faster basically gets to do more damage or avoid the damage. There's actually a table for that. We look here, and then there's a table about rear guards. Here it is, pursuit firepower. And so if the pursuer is of equal speed, you get to roll single fire dice. If it was faster, you get to roll double fire. But if it's a slower pursuer, there is going to be no pursuit firepower. And so since my mech corps is a faster unit and the pursuer are slower infantry, I can pull this guy back and there's going to be no consequence of enemy fire. So that's a nice thing. And so the idea is that I'm going to try to fall back send these this infantry and mech group, try to send them, have them fall back to a new defensive line. That's the idea. And I think I'm going to just send this Ukrainian HQ right there. Now, the only problem I have with the setup is that I have another mech group that was way out here, but it's not in range. It's not in range. I could have deployed my HQ to the south, but it would have not been able to pull this guy out. So that's the only problem I have with this setup, is that the southern flank is actually kind of vulnerable. But I think I'm just going to leave it as is. Of course, the Germans are going to break out of here, and they're going to it's going to be a problem, but at least I can try to at least keep these two armies separated from one another. It's either that or I just don't deploy this mech. I just don't deploy that mech, this mech group here. I leave it at where it is. Maybe I actually I was gonna deploy that 20th Army either way. It's hard to say. Hard to say what I should do here. I think we're just going to stick to the moves that we currently have. Not try to overcomplicate it too much. But yeah, we're doing our main withdrawal, trying to fall back to Kyiv. And it's just not looking good for the Soviets. It really isn't. But yeah, we'll put a reserve unit there, but I do not want to lose the southern HQ, of course. But I could try to have more units fall back. That's the idea. If I deploy this HQ, I can at least send a few more units. And maybe try to beefen up the defensive line at the very least. But of course, we're now abandoning the mech group that's way out there, which is really unfortunate. But I know that Vinica... Yeah, I mean, we could try to fall back more. But I think we're just going to hold as is. Maybe I can send this unit to Vinica, yeah, like that. And then the 37th can actually move to Zitomir. Yeah, that seems to be a slightly better defensive line. Of course, it still leaves Vinica very vulnerable to some sort of German attack. And they could, stack up. They could break through. So I think my best bet actually is not doing that, but actually just trying to set up a defense in depth. It's probably going to be my best bet. So I am going to have to sacrifice an army. If I'm going to sacrifice any army, I might as well sacrifice the 5th Army. Yeah. Yeah, it is a weird situation, I'll tell you. Maybe I just want to... I'm trying to keep my Panzer Corps alive. That's the idea. So I think I'm going to have these 3 infantry armies just... No, we'll have a reserve infantry army. We'll see if this works. This is a definitely a strange setup, but I need to do something to make sure that my units are strong enough to survive a bit longer. I may even want to move these units, try to fall back across the whole front. I think that's my best bet, really. Even the southern HQ, I'm going to do it. It's disrupted, but I'm going to actually move back these units across the river and just try to put as much space as I can between me and the German army, really. We'll move the southern HQ like way over there. Or actually, I guess I'll put him in Uman. But the idea being that we can, should in theory be able to survive the river, whatever the Germans throw at us. I think I can bring up a reinforcement at Vinica. But the idea is that we can withdraw in an orderly fashion, try to get our armies to at least fall back to the Dnieper River line. I think that's the main strategic goal. And I don't want the German army to just overrun us, basically. So we're doing a total retreat in the south for the Soviets. And that's going to conclude the Soviet turn. So a lot of withdrawals for the Soviet army. And now we can update the rail lines, see where the German rail lines are located. And, you know, the German rail lines are pretty freaking advanced. If you ask me, here's a rail line for the Germans. They even have a rail line. Technically, they got a rail line that goes from Königsberg through Kaunas, through Vilna, all the way down to Pinsk, which is insane. I don't know how realistic that would be, but technically that's a German rail line. Right now they have a rail line right here going in, what is it? Going from Lvov. Technically not in Tarnopol, that's still a, a neutral hex. Still a few more areas that are still under Soviet control, like this corridor here. That's important because it's going to cut off the supply lines of the Germans. The Germans are not going to be able to have command of their southern HQ. Right? But this Soviet unit is still in supplies for this turn because it was a Soviet turn. But, and technically, there's a Soviet rail line over here. But, this unit, for all sakes and purposes, is out of supplies. And what basically happened here was that this unit was left behind. It basically ran out of fuel. But anyways, this sums up the Soviet turn. The Soviets have decided to do a total withdrawal from Bessarabia. They've done a total withdrawal from western, or rather eastern Poland. And now they're just running, they're just trying to get the heck out of here. They lost enough critical battles to be demoralized. I'm sure Stalin is furious. But overall, the Germans have made pretty good headway. They've definitely gained a lot of territory, but they have yet to really destroy the Soviet army. That's the important thing. They've destroyed basically the main Western Front, but now the Soviets have a strategic reserve that they're about to deploy, whatever units that were here, plus they also have 4 or 5 more units that they can deploy. So the Soviets have a powerful reserve, not to mention all their other reserve units throughout the Soviet Union. And the Germans, I think, have just underestimated the size and strength of the Soviet Union. Plus, the Soviets have a strong defense on the approaches to Leningrad. So, German army has a lot more to go. But I'm pretty much going to wrap up the turn here, because as we move on to the next sequence in the game, we're going to move on to the month of July. This was the second fortnight, so this was the end of June. And as we move on to the next sequence, we're going to actually start the sequence a new month. So we're going to start production, and then I'll show you how the production works. I will also show you the diplomatic events, a little bit of that. And then we're going to continue on the game. And we'll do a whole nother month of the operation. So you can see that this is a war game. So this war game takes quite a long time to play. I guess the real question I have left is, do we want to do any moves for the British? Right? Technically the British haven't made any moves this turn. I saw that the Axis withdrew. I'm going to probably not do much with the British because this HQ right now is under strength. So I don't see the point of moving the British army. But if I wanted to, I could maybe start deploying a new reinforcing unit over to North Africa. I got to really decide here and now what the British strategy is going to be. Do we want to go for Norway? If we can secure a port in Norway, I mean, that's a juicy target. I think if we do decide to go after Norway, we should probably send our armor that way as well. And really concentrate our armor. So even though this unit is actually not very well suited to operate in the Northern Front. Either that, or I could try to go after a port city in Cherbourg or something like that. Put some pressure on the Germans, be very aggressive with the British. But just understand that the British strategy does not need to be a exclusively North African strategy. And if the Germans set up a fortress of North Africa, then I'm going to have to focus on other targets. So I think for the British right now, we're going to pass. The British have plenty of units for now. I just need these units to be at full strength. That's the problem that I'm really having. And so I'm going to stop this turn here. I'm going to pass for the British. But hopefully you enjoyed this game sequence / tutorial. But I've covered all the main rules, just going down the line of sequences. We did the supply sequence. The only thing left is the political sequence. And I don't actually have to worry about that right now because the morale, we don't have to worry about the morale. The Soviets they don't have any like morale handicap, but some minor powers do. And right now, no minor power is under threat right now. Italy, Romania, none of them. The French armistice already occurred. And then we're not doing any kind of revolt or revolution. Maybe if the Axis do it secure Alexandria, maybe we can do a revolution or revolt in like Palestine or Iraq. I'm pretty sure one of them already happened, but basically we don't have to worry about that right now. And then there's really no defeat of any major power, at least not yet. Maybe the Soviet Union might be defeated. And the rule for naval supremacy is really easy. You just have to count who has more seaways. Right now, this seaway is contested, right? Because you can see the British control Gibraltar, but the Axis control like Tripoli. They control Benghazi. So, you need to control all the naval bases across the seaway to control the seaway. That's one of them. The other seaway is, I'm actually kind of blocking myself there, but it goes to the Atlantic Ocean. It's called the Southern Seaway, and this one is always Allied control. There's really nothing the Germans can do to control that seaway, unless I think they were able to secure Karachi. Perhaps they can control the Indian Ocean, I guess. Or I think this actually area is for the Persian Gulf. I'm not sure. But either way, the chances of really controlling the Indian Ocean is, I think, only British controlled, as well as the Atlantic Ocean. So that's the other seaway. And then, I probably should put the markers on here. They're actually not here. But I just want to put like, Allied naval control. They control the Southern Seaway, but the Axis control the Middle Seaway, right? Or actually, nobody controls the Middle Seaway, rather, but they do control the Northern Seaway, which is the last seaway to keep your eyes open for. And that one is way over here, and it's essentially the one that goes around Norway. And it is defined by whoever controls all these naval bases. So that's why if you're playing as the British, you may want to try to attack this because you can gain naval supremacy again, number one. And not only that, but there's actually some political rules, diplomatic event rules that give you extra production. So that's the reason why, as a British, I would want to go after them. But I need to make sure I have a force that's strong enough. I need a lot of infantry, and I'm going to need probably some armor, preferably some armor, but at least infantry. And I want to be able to control at least one naval base if I can. So maybe we still try to go for Norway. So I got to decide what my target is here and now. I think I'm going to keep this armored unit in reserve. I'm going to try to go for Norway throughout 1941. We'll see if the British can pull off an invasion of Norway in 1941. If not, maybe we got to wait until 1942 to actually have a successful landing in Norway. I think in 1942, if we look at the Allied reinforcements, it's not until November that we actually get another field HQ. So we actually don't really gain many reinforcements of HQs until really the end of 1942, which is a little too late for me. I'd rather secure it in like the summer of 1942 if I can. So I think the opportunity is probably here and now. The only thing we got to be worried about is North Africa. And I kind of want to prioritize North Africa. So we probably won't do anything on the Western Front for now. But yeah, that's going to sum up the Allied turn as well. And now we're going to move on to the month of July. And now we can then go ahead and do the July production, followed by the actual movement and so on. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, good like, thumbs up, all that good stuff. But, if you made it this far, I'm impressed. That means you have a lot of patience and you are definitely a thorough learner, as I am. But the challenge I have for anybody out there that is just like a really smart learner is, let's now try to divert our skills to learning things that can actually make a living. So these games are great, but this is pure entertainment. I think there's a lot more that we can contribute to the world as historians, as wargamers, as people who like analytical thinking as much as we like history, is if we're able to work on communication, but also work on more projects. Really, there's just many more projects to explore. So thank you for tuning in for this video, and that's all I got for this one. I will see you in the next phase of Operation Barbarossa. Peace out.